Welcome back to the summertime version of Rosters of People. 32 teams in 32 days. Today, as you will see from my background, we are here to do the Buffalo Bills. Neil Smith, Jason Draven, Mike Manning, Mike Burland. We got Mike Manning 2 days in a row. Don't say we never did anything for you. We got 2 days of Mike Manning. You have any idea how hard that is to schedule? It's really hard. Mike's a busy guy. He's in demand.
Yeah.
All
the Mannings are really popular there nowadays, so it's kind of hard.
Even Cooper.
Yep.
Even Cooper gets to do commercials now. It's pretty incredible. So by now I think people know the drill, but just in case this is your first rodeo into this, a couple things. This is all based around 12-team PPR. This is a primer for redraft to get you ready for the 2024 fantasy football season. All the rankings that you will hear largely come from Fantasy Pros and the ECR. We will throw in our own ranking, individual personal rankings as well. We are a Fantasy Pros affiliate. This also uses ADPs as gathered by Fantasy Pros. So if you hear us talking about a lot of the numbers, that is where we are pulling that information from. And then in addition to that, today is the 25th of June. So if we say anything that sounds a little weird or doesn't track, check out the wrap-up live stream that will be happening right before draft weekend in September. We will update any takes that we need to update along the way. And with that, let's talk about the team that might have the saddest fan base in any sport except for maybe the Maple Leafs. Can anybody think of a fan base that might be more depressed? Just based on getting so close and then having joy snatched away from them. If you say the Chargers, I'm going to argue with you about it. So be careful. Because the Chargers, the difference is that the Chargers don't typically give you hope. Whereas the other teams that I'm mentioning, they give you a lot of hope and then they just yank it out from under you at the last second. Missing field goals, going to Super Bowls, winning a lot of Stanley Cups, and then not winning anything for a very, very long time, despite looking competent. I digress. It's something about that region of the world, I think, that engenders this. But that's a different topic for a different day. Boy, this team, I'm going to do this real quick here before we get into individual players. Every year, we talk about rankings and projection inflation, which is the idea that a lot of the time it's good teams. Even the experts are not immune to this. But when you look at the Bills, you start to realize that when you start doing the math that is even in the ECR, the projections don't really total out, meaning that a lot of this is inflated. So they'll attribute more passing yards than they would like receiving yards. And basically it's the general idea that certain teams, especially good teams, their projections and therefore their rankings, it all gets inflated. And the math doesn't total out to zero. And this has been the case in Buffalo for a couple years. And this year it's actually worse than normal. So it's just something that I've noticed about the Bills as it relates to like the expert rankings and projections are even wrong and they don't make a lot of sense. And then you layer on the public's general enthusiasm for this team and the fact that they've got some very interesting fantasy weapons. And it gets into a really weird area as we're going to go through. So bear with us, gentle viewer and gentle listener, because this is going to get a little wild. Before we move into quarterback, does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I know mine work out, but I don't know about anybody else's.
Yes, but you and I have had this stance for years, and so does Steve, for example, who will be editing these. Our projections always total out because it would be disingenuous for them to not do that. Not everybody feels that way, I've learned over the years. Looking at you, ESPN. I didn't name any names. I just named a company. Don't sue me for defamation, please. You have better lawyers, candidly. All right, let's go into quarterback. So you know him, you love him. It's Josh Allen. Josh Allen opens the early rankings QB1. Shocker, I know, shocking. This is all shocking information. That would translate to 17 overall in the what should be the ADP, right? So he's 17 overall in the ECR. His actual ADP is 38. And that goes back to the topic we brought up yesterday. If you heard yesterday's show, if you haven't, check that out because it's on the Ravens, so you should check that out. We mentioned this on yesterday's show. The expert consensus has finally kind of gotten to a point where quarterback is getting moved up even higher than what the public is usually going to do. And that's like a change in philosophy that's been brewing over the last 2 years because of the perceived scarcity at the quarterback position and all the injuries and whatnot. It's weird. It's just weird as somebody who's been doing this for a long time to see experts ranking quarterbacks higher than the public. For most of my career doing this, it's been the exact opposite of that, except for the last 2 seasons. It's a very weird thing that's going on. But let's just start with it this way. We could have that conversation about should you take a quarterback at 17?
Hard pass.
Can't shake my head hard enough without giving myself whiplash. Do not take a quarterback at 17, please. Versus the merits of taking him at 38, which I could maybe make that argument if you really wanted me to. It's not something I would personally do. But I want to go to Mike Manning because I think the real conversation is, should Josh Allen be QB1? Should he be? Are we okay with that?
I'm okay with it. I mean, if you look at his past 4 seasons, he's been number 1, number 2, and then number 1. And some people are going to be concerned about the idea that he lost Stephon Diggs. I don't know why people would care if he lost Gabe Davis, but he did lose Gabe Davis. So
well, you
it's
just
kind of
offended like a whole cross section of the internet who loves Gabe Davis for reasons that escape me.
But
we'll see how much they love him in Jacksonville.
That might be true.
That will be the big test, actually.
But if you look at how Allen played last year, Diggs struggled last year at the second half of the season.
I know it?
Guess where Allen still was at the second half of the season? He was still QB1. He just did more with his legs, and it was spread out more. You know, you saw some Shakir there. You saw Kincaid picking it up. Knox returned. James Cook was a little bit involved. But, like, Joe Brady, when he took over in week 11, prior to week 11, he went from the 25th ranked rushing attack in terms of run rate to the 2nd. But that involved Allen, too. That wasn't throwing a lot more carries to James Cook or Latavius Murray or Leonard Fournette. That rotation of old people that was in the backfield there for a while.
That people wanted so desperately to happen, and then it never really panned out.
Yeah, Allen went from 17 designed runs to like 41 in the second half of the season. So, like, Allen's going to be Allen. It's just...
also does a lot with the narrative around they're going to protect Allen and they're not going to let him run the way they used to. And we saw
that is protecting Allen. He likes to play that way.
Worked out for you, as Mike just laid out. He went from 17 design runs in 10 games to 41. So it's like, Mike, I think you've outlined that very well. Is there anything else you want to discuss as it relates to Allen?
No, I mean, again, I'm not huge on taking a quarterback that early either way, but if you are, Allen's a safe bet to continue to be the red zone production that he always has and be the rushing threat. So whether Keon Coleman and such, as we'll get to, works out, it's just going to be – he's going to still be a top-tier quarterback.
Yes. I will, before we move too far away, I agree with that. I do think he's number 1 in my rankings. I just would echo the same thing as I already did, which is I'm not taking him at 17. If y'all want to take him at 17, you have fun. I'm doing something else. So, does anybody have any other thoughts on Josh Allen? I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I don't really feel like there's a lot to discuss. Josh Allen's good. He should be the number 1 quarterback. I don't think anyone in this room is going to suggest you should take him inside the top 20, though.
Nope.
That's all running backs and wide receivers for me, and maybe Travis Kelce, but even really not that. Just running backs and wide receivers, top 20. Okay, so we agree on that. Josh Allen's backup is Mitchell Trubisky again. Who says he can't go home again? He's going to look so good wearing that baseball cap, that blue baseball cap that he handles so well. It's Mitchell Trubisky. We've seen this movie a million times. At least he knows the offense. That's good. He'll never be able to throw a football to his left side. I don't know what that is, but it's never going to happen. If it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. So we don't really want to belabor too much at quarterback at this point. Josh Allen, good at football. Don't take him in the top 20. If you want him as the number 1 QB off the board, fine. Just not in the top 20. Running back. You mentioned James Cook, Mike. This was one of my I had James Cook a lot higher than normal last year, and I was rewarded with that, with a lot of production. But what I want to start this conversation with is we're gonna go through this formally. But where I want to start with is this: this is one of those things that can be interesting because when you go back and look at just the raw numbers for Cook, I was right to have him ranked as high as I did. I rostered him in a lot of leagues and was at the end very happy with the point total and usage that I received based on where he was being ranked initially and how I moved him up. I will tell everyone listening to this, that was a roller coaster. It was one of the most weekly frustrating things I've ever been a part of. And it's so hard to just project what am I getting week in, week out. So you would have some huge games and then he would just disappear. And then he would have these weeks where he just looked god awful, where he's dropping the ball in critical situations. And I mean that very literally. They would put the ball in his hands and he would drop it coming out of the backfield. And it's like, that is not going to engender a long career. So we're going to get into the positives about James Cook, but I want to couch all of it in the idea that last year I was very high on him because you were getting a discount. And yes, if you listen to me, it paid you out. But getting there was not a lot of fun. I have a lot less hair than what I did at the start of last year because some of it's just evaporated and some of that's James Cook's fault. So that's my PSA on James Cook is that buyer beware. It's not going to be super consistent and you got to have a little bit of a strong stomach for this, especially based on now we're going to get into the actual. So James Cook, opening ranking in the ECR, RB 15. That would translate to 45 overall, roughly. His ADP is 60. So you could tell that there's some other people that went on the James Cook roller coaster last year, and you're like, I don't know if I want to do this again. Mike, talk me off the ledge.
I mean, it's kind of hard not to, or hard to do that because I don't have high up. I'm not optimistic about James Cook this coming season, really. Because even as we said earlier with Josh Allen, how they became the second highest run rate team of the second half of the season, it didn't translate to Cook's workload. Like he still only had 5 games of 20 plus touches. That includes receptions, everything. Like he's just not going to do that. His general workload was around 12 to 13 carries and like 3 targets. Is like probably his average. So if you're sitting there and looking at that, I'm not pushing too high up for him. Like he was good in terms of overall usage because he was on a good offense. He got touchdowns. And then again, like you said, the big thing was the fact that you got him so cheap last year.
Yes.
So
now he's a 5th round pick.
Yeah. Now if he's in the like towards the RB dead zone type, like the back end of the guys that you're going to even be looking at as using every week. Like
he'd be your RB2, basically. Yeah. He'd be your RB2 because you'd get 3 wide receivers more than likely and 2 running backs in 5 rounds. If you're let's just use that as the hypothetical for the purpose of this discussion. So he'd be your weekly RB2.
I want my weekly RB2 to have more than 15 touches a week.
I'd like my weekly RB2 to like maybe get a discount on somebody who's going to be more involved in the passing game consistently also. Because we're talking about PPR, it's like he's only you said it yourself, he's only averaging like 3 targets a week. Like it's not great.
They just didn't target the running back position a whole lot.
And historically they don't. They throw it to tight ends. That's been part of the issue is that they want to find, we'll get into this in a little bit later in the show, but foreshadowing, they want to throw it to the slot. They just haven't had that guy for years since Cole Beasley. And they want to figure that out. But this team's going to look a little different, I think, from what we saw last year, because I think there's going to be a ton of 2 tight end sets. And we'll see how it goes. They might not do that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it will be. And this is where I want Mike, because I know you do this for a living, breaking down this type of thing. Are you expecting them to be an 11 personnel? Is that what this is now? And 3 wide? and running Khalil Shakir, how do you expect the Bills to deploy? Or is it going to be 2 tight end sets and we're going to have somebody opposite Kincaid? What do you think?
Well, I think they're going to have 2 tight ends on the field pretty often. Still, they wanted to do that when Knox was healthy.
Yes.
So then Knox got hurt for about a third of the season. So that put a wrench in their plans. They want Kincaid to be a slot option. They want Shakir to be a slot option, but then that also leaves Curtis Samuel coming over as a slot option. And he's going to be probably a chess piece. He's going to move to the backfield. So that also could affect James Cook.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Curtis Samuel goes to the backfield. They're going to toss it to Samuel, not Cook, more likely than not if he's in the backfield. Or else why would you put him there?
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes Keon Coleman out wide, which even draft experts were saying he should move to the slot. So that's like another option of being a big slot, but they said they're not going to do that. So Shakir came on strong last year at the end of the season. So it's just going to be likely a lot of, like we said, a lot of slot.
They've gone around Stephon Diggs being a
outside.
team of only slot players. It's wild. That's why I was asking about personnel, because I'm like, how do you unpack this? Because I've been following their roster moves like everybody, and I'm like, I don't understand this team anymore.
No, they're gonna, like I said, use 2 tight ends, 1 running back, and then it's just whether they have 2 wide receivers and the wide receivers in the slot, or if they have 2 wide receivers and then tight ends in the slot. Because both Knox also plays in the slot a pretty good bit. He's only in line 40% of the time, so it's just becoming like a headache. It's going to be difficult. But that's what we said last year too, was we knew Diggs and then we knew Davis, what their roles were. We just wanted to figure out between Deontay Hardy, Khalil Shakir, or Dalton Kincaid, who was going to be the slot guy. And it was Kincaid.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah.
Like that's the way it worked out, because it's a rookie tight end, as we predicted, always, unless your name is Sam Laporta, takes a little while to kind of get rolling along. So, okay. So, is anybody bullish on James Cook?
I mean, I'm fine taking him there. I think that's a good value. I don't think, honestly, I would expect him to probably land about that same spot again, based on my projections. I have him as my RB12. So, and it's pretty similar numbers, to be honest. But I do actually see, because this offense is going to be more spread out, I do see him getting a couple more touchdowns, which I think benefits him for sure. But it's going to be very interesting because of, like you said, the Samuel debacle. That's a player that I'm pretty high on just because I have seen the talent and saw what he did with the Commanders.
I'm familiar with your body of work in this area, Jason. People who followed this show in the past know how much you love Curtis Samuel. So
big fan.
I'm aware of that. Okay. So Jason's willing to take him at the ADP of 60. I am, as I said, I'm less bullish on this idea, and it sounds like Mike Manning is like makes me a little nervous.
He was RB12 last year in terms of total points, but he was RB like 16 in terms of points per game.
Yeah.
So you're just hoping that he repeats.
Right. But as we kind of talked about, my problem with that is last year I had margin for error on this. Now I'm paying sticker, and people who've listened to me for a long time know Neil no like pay sticker. Neil like discount in everything. Neil no pay sticker price. Nor recommend anyone pay sticker price for anything, really, because you can always find. That's how you win, is finding upside. It's not by paying sticker price on things. I will say, if you did bite the bullet on this in the 5th round, it wouldn't kill your team. This isn't the kind of decision where it's like, if you do this wrong, you're just done. It would be an annoyance that you could figure out. But you had one other note on here, Mike. Did I miss it? Because you were talking about how the Bills' run game evolved.
Yeah, it's just like I said earlier with Allen's thing. They did run the ball more in the second half to like the second highest rate in the league from the 25th. But the issue was that it benefited Allen more than it benefited Cook
or any of the other running backs,
or any other
just
old
to put a
running
fine
back.
Point on this. So yeah, I'm a little nervous about paying sticker for this. Mike Burland, what do you think about James Cook? We haven't heard from you yet on this topic. Where are you at with this?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the middle there. I don't love where he's going. I don't hate it either. End of the 5th round, I can live with it. You just got to live with the boom bust games because of the lack of touchdowns. And I don't see why we should think he's going to get significantly more than I think he had 2 rushing touchdowns last year. I mean, I think the most for a running back under this kind of iteration of the Bills is 7, and that's Singletary. And then there's the case they always seem to want to bring someone else in, if it's Fournette or Latavius Murray or Damian Harris. It's like they always want to bring someone else in, Zach Moss. They don't want to give – we saw a run from Singletary at the end of the 2021 season, and then 2022, we're all excited about him, and then it goes back to, well, let's get Zach Moss involved, and are they going to do that with Ray Davis or someone else on this roster? So I don't hate it, don't love it, but – you got to live with the boom bust kind of player, which I think he's going to kind of continue to be with the lack of touchdowns.
Okay. I think all that's fair, because I do want to point out, it's not like I suddenly have flipped script and now I hate James Cook. I still like James Cook fine, but my whole argument from last year was you're getting a guy on a premium offense that is going to get a lot of work, and it's going to be a little wonky, but given where he's going, there's a lot of upside here. I just don't love the fact that now the market has corrected and he's going closer to where he probably should have been. And it's like, I don't love that. It makes me want to think about, like, okay, what's going to have to happen for him to ascend? So what would need to happen for James Cook to break in the top 10 at running back? And I'm like, people are going to have to get hurt. That's the only
18
way.
touches a game.
Yeah, that ain't never going to happen. Never going to happen. If you believe that, I got a bridge in New York I want to talk to you about selling you. Like, if you believe that's happening, then let's do that. Like, I got a contract right here. Let me get it. Let's we'll absolutely have that conversation about selling you the Brooklyn Bridge, man. Because no, like you're talking about people in front of him would have to get injured for the year, which could happen. But I don't really see what would need to occur. I'm not seeing the path, and it scares me. Let's talk about Ray Davis, because that was discussed. So Ray Davis is actually being drafted, which I found interesting. His early ECR puts him as the RB 56, which would translate to 191 overall. He would functionally be Mr. Irrelevant in a 12-team, 16-round draft, which is like a standard for 12-team. He'd basically be the last guy off the board. His ADP is 154. I really firmly believe that has to do with him playing for the Bills. If he was playing for other teams, I don't think anybody would care. Does anybody have anything nice to say about Ray Davis? Collegiately? Now? Does anyone care?
I mean,
Not really.
In terms of his college career, he was a workhorse.
Yes.
So James Cook wasn't. And that's continued into the NFL. His body type and everything else, it showed that he shouldn't be a 3-down guy. Davis is bigger, better in the goal line, and there's a chance that he is worth drafting.
I agree with that. I do think he would be worth drafting, especially because he'd effectively just be not really a handcuff by design, but he would function in that way. I wouldn't expect him to be like a true handcuff where it's like, oh, if something happens to Cook, suddenly Davis is just taking all the work. You know what I mean? That's never going to happen. But because it's priced like a handcuff, it kind of makes sense. What I think is really going on here is, Mike, I think you're on the right. You're very much on the right path. I think this is Leonard Fournette. It's the big guy. It's the big dude that they always want. They're not. I don't see them changing that philosophy. They want a big bruiser. What they were hoping Damian Harris could do for them. What they were hoping LeGarrette Blount could do for them. Like what they were hoping. Who's the other old man they had? Somebody said it earlier. It's out of my brain.
Latavius Murray.
Thank you, Latavius Murray. I've blocked that out because it was infuriating. But they always want that bigger dude who could come in and pound it in between the tackles, and I swear it's maddening. Is gonna be trotting in red zone and goal to go situations inside the 10. Cook a lot of the time. Cook will come back on for third down because he's the better pass catcher, but he'll leave on first and second. And you're going to be sitting there swearing at your TV or your phone. And that's what I think the Ray Davis thing is about. is that instead of having 2 old guys, I think the plan was, just give me Ray Davis. Didn't cost me anything to acquire really in the draft if I'm the actual Bills, the real franchise. I think that's what's really happening here. And at 154, if I am getting pigeonholed into taking Cook, I could see myself wrapping around at the end of the draft and taking Ray Davis and holding him for a little while and just seeing what I get. It doesn't cost me much of anything. And if something was to happen to Cook, you would definitely see an uptick in Ray Davis. But I'm very convinced that what would happen is if something did happen to Cook, Ray Davis would get an uptick, but they would start bringing in old guys again.
Well, isn't Ty Johnson still there?
He probably is. He
Speaking
probably
of
is.
old
He has no ADP and is not in the ECR, but he probably is still there for all I know.
He got a strange amount of usage last year, especially towards the end of the year.
It's going to be frustrating. That's why I'm kind of steering away from Cook, where I'm like, I was willing to put up with this when it was cheap. When it's not cheap anymore, I don't like it. Let's do the meat and potatoes of this actual show, gentlemen. Let's get into the wide receiver room. Team only slots. It's just all slots. And Jason,
So excited.
I'm gonna rattle this off, and then I'm just gonna lay out for Jason because I know he's got something prepared for this. So, the way this shakes out is the wake of Stephon Diggs has created this weird situation. So here it comes. Curtis Samuel in the early ECR, wide receiver 52, should translate to about 130 overall. Is where he should be roughly being drafted. I'm sorry, I said 32. I meant 52. Excuse me. Correction. Wide receiver 52 should translate to about 130 overall. He is going at 92 overall as an ADP. Keep that in your brain, gentle listener or viewer. Next up, Keon Coleman, rookie extraordinaire in the ECR. The experts have no idea how to deal with this. His ranking, wide receiver 53, 1 spot behind Curtis Samuel. And he should be going at, logically, 131 overall. So literally, that's how they have it in the ECR is 1-2. Keon Coleman's ADP, 71. Okay. And then finally, as was mentioned, Khalil Shakir, still on the team, still here, still selling fake doors. This is year 2 of Khalil Shakir, correct? Okay. Khalil Shakir, year 2.
Yeah.
Wide receiver 63 in the ECR. Should translate to about 151 overall. ADP 104. I'm going to lay out for Jason, but before I do, remember that thing about projection inflation that I was talking about at the very beginning 20 minutes ago, and about how people get inflated because it's the Bills? That's this whole conversation. Jason, go nuts, dude. Lay out for it.
All right, man. So it's all for me. I'm buying into Curtis Samuel because he can move into any position, but also the fact that the Bills got rid of Davis, got rid of Diggs, both ending up with 241 targets that are just vacated. Of the players that I think can actually step into this role who haven't been there, it's going to be Curtis Samuel. He is the most veteran player. He has shown what he can do at everywhere he's played. I mean, he's been behind 2 number ones in both DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin in both Carolina, the Panthers and Commanders. And so having this opportunity where he can play wherever they need him to and be that versatile player, I think is really going to boost him. So Stephon Diggs saw 160 targets. I'm only projecting him at 124, and it's really boosting him up. At that value, I'm more than willing to pay for that cost of a wide receiver.
Hold on. Let me back up. Stop you for a second there. Let's just put a fine point on that. So Stephon Diggs, as you mentioned, is going to vacate. There's 160 whatever vacated targets on the
200,
which is
160, 244.
244 vacated targets. Okay.
Yeah, because both him and Davis are gone.
Right. Okay, so it's 244 between the two, and you're projecting Curtis Samuel will absorb how many of those? Half.
124.
Okay, so it's
not even
about
half.
It's about half. Okay.
Well, I guess it's half.
That's why I'm just trying to nail this down because for the listening audience at home, playing along at home, and then also you didn't mention it, but I'm sure you will. It's brought up already. You'll get some carries out of Curtis Samuel. So what you're saying is Curtis Samuel by ADP, not by ECR, by ADP is about an 8th round pick. That's that math I was doing in my head. If people saw my eyes rolling because I was trying to count. I wasn't doing that at Jason because I want to be clear. I normally do eye roll at Jason, but I wasn't doing that in this case. I was just trying to count. 8th round pick. Are you in front of 8th round pick, in alignment with 8th round pick, or are you saying like you want to go even more? You're like, where are you at on that, Jason? What does that translate to by your model?
I mean, I'm willing to take him there. So I have him as my wide receiver 28, and that's being extremely conservative. So he's a wide receiver 2, but at 124 target, it's going to be, again, the issue is already baked in. This would be his first ever 1,000-yard season from just receiving. So with that being baked in, I have him lower, but the opportunity for him to really play anywhere and really expand his role to actually get up to that 160 target mark, I wouldn't be surprised. And if he gets to that point, it's going to be significantly higher for me to really buy into him. Especially since wide receiver 52 to 28, that's a pretty big gap. So,
okay. So we've heard your rationale for why you're so high on Curtis Samuel. Do you have anything that you want to say about Keon Coleman or Khalil Shakir? Because the public is all in on Keon Coleman as I wrap off there.
Which again, I completely understand, but it's the unknown. The other issue with that is Shakir. We've seen they haven't. With the opportunities he had last season, he didn't grow into that role well enough, and I think Samuel is going to easily slot into it and really take over for the 2 receivers that were more veteran presence and just be able to play wherever they need him to. And being that kind of a player that you can move into really anywhere and play well is really going to benefit him.
Okay. All right. So with that in mind, let's pivot to Mike Manning, because Mike, I know you have thoughts on this topic. So go ahead, take us through what you have here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that like they're all, as we said, slot receivers. Curtis Samuel generally plays in the slot. I know you say he moves out wide too. Yeah, he can. And as we said, the backfield too. Khalil Shakir, pretty much a slot guy, especially based on his body type and everything. And Keon Coleman is probably going to play out wide, but I just didn't have a huge I wasn't impressed with him coming into the NFL draft, so I don't think he can be a number 1. I don't think he can be an alpha. Early second-round wide receivers isn't guaranteeing anything by any means. Doesn't mean playing time, but this wide receiver room will force playing time for him. If I have to do anybody based on ADP as well, I guess I'm leaning Shakir because he flashed last year. I thought he was a talented player coming out of Boise State. And him and Samuel both are, pretty versatile in terms of making plays after the catch. They don't have a deep player anymore, so I don't know what they're going to do with that in terms of the Gabe Davis role, taking the top off. It's going to be probably a lot of shorter stuff and crossing routes, things along those lines, where it's one of these where somebody's going to be the target monster. It's just, is the wide receiver on this team going to be good enough to overtake the tight ends and actually have fantasy value at their ADP? I guess if any of them do, it's going to be, my opinion, Shakir has the best upside value because of how low he's going, even in comparison to Samuel and such. But Samuel got a good contract. He's probably going to lead the wide receivers in targets. With that being said,
we have seen this from the Bills before, but you would have to have a long memory a little bit because this was the pre-Stephon Diggs era Bills when Cole Beasley had a 1,000-yard season and they didn't have anybody who could really take the top off the defense, and it was pre-Gabe Davis as well. So it's been a long time since we've seen the dink and dunk Bills. And what's funny is I might be misremembering some of that because it was probably like 4 years ago, but and that was during the pandemic, so that all gets blurred. But I do recall that when they didn't really have much of a field stretcher, and they then pivoted to getting field stretchers, and then that didn't really work out. And it's just based on the theory that everything in life is a giant circle. We're just going in a big circle. That didn't work. We'll try this now. We just keep doing the same thing. So that's kind of where I'm at with this whole situation. But before I go too far into it, Mike, I want to address your question formally. Does Samuel take away backfield snaps from Cook? Because I think he does.
I think he does. 2020, he had 41 carries. I know that's 4 years ago. But guess who the offensive coordinator was for the Panthers in 2020? It's the offensive coordinator currently on the Bills. So is he going to get 40 carries? I don't know. But he's had multiple times in his career where, 2022, just 2 seasons ago now, 38 carries. So I think he's going to take it. I guess that's why if they're going to truly spread the ball around, there's not going to be an alpha. I think Samuel does have the best chance at being fantasy relevant just because of that. But yeah, it's generally for these ambiguous wide receiver rooms on a good offense, I just like to go with the last one drafted. But even then, like Shakir's kind of being a little bit too high in my opinion. So I might be just out on all these guys.
So that's kind of where I'm getting to with this whole situation is like Curtis Samuel is an 8th round pick. I could justify it. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It sounds about pretty close to right, to be honest. It's like 8th round pick. There's enough meat on that bone. I'll put it to you this way. If I saw you take Curtis Samuel in the 8th round in a PPR league, I wouldn't be like, what are you doing? It'd be like, yeah, kind of makes sense. He's going to get a lot of targets. He's going to be involved. And as Mike Manning pointed out, good contract. They didn't sign him to some, throwaway contract where it doesn't matter and they'll just cut him. He's going to be involved. And I think he will get some carries. To Mike Burland's point about 40 touches is probably the ceiling, but that's not nothing. It's not completely irrelevant. Like he will, in all likelihood, if he stays healthy, cobble together a very productive fantasy season. And that's why 8th round pick makes sense, because by then you're kind of starting to fill out your bench. And it's like, well, no, I could see Curtis Samuel having value during the buys. And if somebody gets hurt, I could see him having even more value. And like, he could be good. I'm not crazy. Now, I will say I would like it more in the 10th round. I would prefer that. Like if we were talking about like what I'd actually like, it's like, yeah, give me the 10th round. I am out on Keon Coleman. Y'all are crazy. If you're listening to this, people with the 71 ADP, you lost your minds. You're out of your mind. Like that's insane for a guy that I also, Mike, man, I was not high on him coming into the league either. And I was like, and then to see where he landed, and then to see the job theoretically that he's supposed to do, and it's like, wait, is he Gabe Davis? He's not Gabe Davis. Like that doesn't work that way. Like you're gonna okay, like what are we doing? So I don't know what to expect, but what I do know is that 70 overall is way too rich for me. I will not be dealing with that. That is not happening. And and Khalil Shakir at 104, I could also make the argument for. You're not going to blow anybody away with that, but there is a non-zero chance that there's enough meat on that bone for you that just if he does get something reminiscent of that slot job, he could deliver on that as an ADP. But yeah, it is funny to look at Mike's notes where it's like Khalil Shakir played in the slot 77% of the time. Dalton Kincaid plays in the slot 60% of the time. Curtis Samuel played in the slot 70% of the time in Washington.
So on that note, is there an outside chance that like none of those guys, obviously they can't all play the slot. So, I mean, there's guys like MVS on this team and Mac Hollins, and they just put them on the outside, and that even muddies the waters even more.
I didn't even put MVS on here. That's how little I think of MVS.
Oh, I don't think anything.
And he has no ADP either, so it's like
but he's out there a certain percentage because he can play on the outside and stretch the field, and these guys can't. That just makes everything else more frustrating.
Is the general supposition there that there's too many slots and only one slot job, so effectively someone is going to be big sad?
It seems like. I mean, they can't all play the slot, so.
Yeah, so I found the year was 2019 that you were looking for, and it had John Brown, Cole Beasley, Dawson.
That was driving me nuts. I couldn't remember if it was 2020 or 2019. Thank you, because it was smoke. It was the last year of John Smoke Brown, who was supposed to be the field stretcher, but he's my age. And it's like, he ain't running. Like, that was over years ago. It was 2019. Thank you. That was the year I was thinking of, where Cole Beasley went off for like 1,000 yards, and they didn't really have a field stretcher, and they just dinked and dunked it down the field. But that ended up killing them later in the year and in the playoffs, because they couldn't take deep shots properly, and it got it twisted. I'm a little concerned that something like that happens again with this team. Well, this team is better than that team, though. I will say, than the 2019 team. They have a better defense, especially a better defense than that team. So it's like, I'm not as concerned, but it is something that I did note around. Like, it does feel like on a 5-year clock that we've basically just gone in a big circle, and it's like, what the hell? Like, okay, if anybody is going to end up being the big sad, as that's my phrase, but I'm talking about what Mike Burland's talking about. If anybody is going to be big sad, who's most likely to be the one that just completely skunks you and is just useless? Like, you spend a draft pick on him, and then he just doesn't. That's it. He's just riding the pine the whole year. Who's your pick?
Well, I mean, if you're looking at the number, it's going to be Coleman, but outside of that, I think it's Shakir.
Yeah, I lean Shakir. I just feel like they're going to want to make Coleman work, so he might not just completely skunk you, but at ADP, it's definitely Coleman.
Yeah, that's the one with the biggest risk. But that's not what I was saying. Most likely, like, biggest risk is obviously Keon Coleman, because he's going at 70 overall, which, again, I cannot stress to you how nervous that makes me. That's a guy you're going to be playing at 70 overall. I want to be clear. You're going to start that guy a lot. It's like, like this. I don't even like rookies in general that high. Like, especially this, though, is even worse. Mike Manning, who do you think would be most likely to skunk you? Just completely pull the carpet out from under you.
There's a chance that, like, Shakir, if the only thing I can basically feel confident in is that he'll have the boom games, like his 100 yards and a touchdown type games that he had the couple last season. He'll have those, but he could be a headache, I believe, if he doesn't have a set role. Mm-hmm. And then Samuel has the chance based on injury, because he has not been healthy in recent years.
Yeah,
in his entire career, he hasn't been the most healthy player.
There you go. That's kind of what it boils down to. Because if he would have been able to stay healthy, he probably wouldn't be on, what is this, his third team or fourth team? It's at least 3 versus 4.
I think it's just his second. I think it's Panthers and
Commanders now this. So it's at least 3.
That's what
he's
third.
Point.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, if he could stay a little healthier, I think he probably wouldn't bounce around as much. But, you know, we know that going in about Curtis Samuel. See, that is Jason. This is where you and I do align. Of the things on this list, I'm not as high on Curtis Samuel as you are, but of the things on this list, that's the one I feel best about, because that's the one that I've seen, and I know what it is, and I feel like I know what I'm getting. Whereas Keon Coleman is the mystery box. I could be anything, and I think in this case, I think I kind of know what it is, and it doesn't entice me. And then there's Shakir, which is like, at least it's affordable. But if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm kind of out on the Bills in general. I didn't think until yesterday, when I was putting this together, that I would be this negative on a team that's this good for fantasy. But given the inflated price points that are being required, I don't want to pay them. Like, Allen is Allen, and that's great. Cook, you're paying sticker now. Don't love it. The wide receivers all have issues. There's upside on 2 of the 3 of them, in my opinion. But I don't know how I feel about a lot of this. What's really messed up is, given my general stance and opinion on tight end, the thing that I think I actually feel the best about is what we're going to move into now. So here it is, Dalton Kincaid. What a weird year. What a weird thing we're going to do here. Dalton Kincaid opens as the tight end 5. That should translate to roughly the 67th pick. He's going his ADP. His actual ADP is 53. I don't love taking a tight end that high, but I actually can't really argue about this. I don't see how I'm going to make a logical argument against it. Mike Manning, you were explaining to me at length last year, actually, about Dalton Kincaid, and in fact, several people on this show were trying to talk me into Dalton Kincaid last year. So I'm just going to shut it. Go ahead. Knock yourselves out. Whoever's ready.
I mean, really, I don't even have a whole lot to add compared to what last year was. He's going to get more playing time now because he's the number one tight end instead of the splitting as much with Dawson Knox, but they're both going to be on the field. It's going to continue to happen. Kincaid's going to move around the field. He's going to be the between the numbers option for Allen. So he's probably going to lead the team in targets, which that's good. But yeah, we're seeing a bit of inflation because of the wide receiver room that's pushing Kincaid up even past where maybe he should even be. It could just be nobody's going to have 10 targets in the game. Everybody's going to have like 6 to 8, which will be a headache.
That will be a serious nightmare. That's what ends up happening. Jason, you love Kincaid?
I do. I have him in my top 12 tight ends. But again,
that's a really low bar. He's going to 5. Look, so
I know.
Tight end 5.
I'm lower on him.
I think people could make the argument that he should be higher.
I agree because there are a lot of vacated targets. However, I do actually, like I said, I have again Curtis Samuel having more targets currently. He is still going to split with Knox. I do have Knox taking quite a big hit on his target share, but Kincaid will get over the 100 target mark. I have him at 116 currently for targets, but it's his yardage that I'm more worried about. I have him playing a smaller role there because, like you said, I really do think it's going to be more dig and dunk. I don't think that any of these players are getting over 14 yards of reception. Like, I don't see that happening.
It's going to be a really low A-dot team.
Yeah.
And so theory.
With that in mind, I mean, there's going to be a lot of targets, which will help you in PPR, but in standard, it's terrifying.
Yeah,
and
nobody cares about standard.
Correct. That what you're hoping for
is years ago, and thank goodness.
What you're really hoping for is that Kincaid is the one who gets the touchdowns, and it's hard to predict that because of the fact that Allen likes to rush it. They're going to use Cook and they're going to use whoever else, whether that's Davis or Johnson or whomever, Samuel even. Like there's just too many things that I'm more worried about taking away from him. While there are like we talked about, the 240 targets that are vacated, you split that between the two players, and that's kind of what I pretty much did. I gave, like I said, Kincaid 116 targets and Samuel 124, but that's still, unless one of them just really takes over or there's the injury, it's hard to really want to feed that to Kincaid. And also the fact that he kind of made a name for himself, I could see him getting some decent coverage too. So it'll be very interesting to see how teams are going to try and play this team, knowing that they don't have that field stretcher. So,
Mr. Burland, thoughts on Dalton Kincaid?
Yeah, it just makes me worried. Just like with Keon Coleman, I think a lot of the general fantasy community thinks, he's going to be 70% of what Diggs was, and that's not going to happen. Or Kincaid's going to be like Kelsey and Andrews, and there's just a reason why we don't see many teams build around their offense around a tight end besides, the Ravens and the Chiefs, because there's not many tight ends that can do it. So I think that's the expectation for Kincaid. I think he's going to rise as well. Like he's right there with Andrews already, and it just makes me nervous to buy into that. But, we look for in tight ends, can you lead the team in targets? He's definitely on that kind of short list of tight ends that could. So, if you want to take the tight end that high, and again, there's kind of a group of 4 or 5, maybe 6 tight ends, go for one of the last ones. And Kincaid should be, tight end 4 or 5 come August, September time. So, but yeah, it makes me nervous to just think he's going to be the next Kelsey or Andrews, because there's not many of those guys.
Yeah, as I said, this is the thing I actually feel the best about in terms of confidence that you could return on your investment. Because I feel like you're going to get a lot of targets. You're going to get some red zone targets. They're going to get him the ball. I'm not worried about any of that. I agree with Mike Manning. It would not shock me at all to see him lead the team in targets. It really wouldn't surprise me in any way, shape, or form. So I feel pretty confident that he could get you what you're putting in. But my issue goes back to I don't, as a strategy, typically go for the top 5 tight ends because there's too much volatility in that in general. You really are playing with fire. And so for me, what's crazy is that was my big takeaway. So as we move it, we'll move into final thoughts on the Bills. And for me, my final thought was just I'd started down this road. I wasn't expecting to be this negative. Listening to myself, it makes it sound like I'm like a Bills hater or something. And that's not the case. Like, I think the Bills will be a very good real life football team, playoff team, good defense, like good offense. But in terms of fantasy, everything is either too expensive or there's too much volatility. And so that's kind of how I've been parsing this in the early, as we sit here in June, where it's like, yeah, there's some good stuff, but all of that comes at like an ultra premium. You're paying like super sticker price for all of the really good stuff, and everything else has some kind of problem. But even then, you're not getting what I feel is an appropriate enough discount to really want to deal with it. Closest thing is Curtis Samuel in a lot of ways, but even that is like an 8th round pick, and I'm like, where's my discount? Where's my injury discount? Like, and I'm not getting it because he's on the Bills. It all goes back to the whole like projection inflation thing, and I don't know. I'm not going to be big on the Bills. I don't think this year. I'm not going to be recommending a lot of Bills as this offseason moves on. So final thoughts. Let's go around the horn. Jason, final thoughts on the Bills as we get out of here.
I'm buying in a Curtis Samuel, but that's really just it. That's my go-to right now.
How many Curtis Samuel jerseys do you own?
No one, but I'm going to be probably getting one this year.
You're going to get one of each?
Yeah.
Get a Panthers, a Commanders, and just hang them up on the wall. Mike Manning, final thoughts on the Bills as we get out of here.
Full confidence in Allen being the QB1. So that's about the only thing I'm confident in on the Bills. Again, I think Kincaid leads the team in targets, whether it be because of a Samuel injury or because it's just so spread out that even the leading target getter is just such a weird number.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could see them being a team that their highest target getter is like the lowest percentage of the team's targets.
I could see that too, actually.
So it's just like
really
it's just spread out so much that it's just aggravating. Sure, I don't blame you for doing Cook at his ADP. I probably won't.
Yeah.
I don't blame you for Curtis Samuel at his ADP. I probably won't.
I probably won't either unless I get really.
So I might throw a
hard
couple
for
darts
wide
at
receiver.
Shakir.
Okay. That all seems very reasonable. Mike Burland, final thoughts on the Bills as we sign off for the day.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to choose one player given ADP, I think it's James Cook for me. And yeah, I think I just want to avoid those receivers unless Shakir falls a little bit, and I'll go with the last guy in that wide receiver room that's being drafted. But right now, he's just a little bit too high for me. So I think James Cook's the one given ADP that I'm most comfortable with.
All right. And that is it. That's the definitive breakdown of the Bills for 2024. This is a weird team that I think certain folks are still, especially the public, I think they're still kind of thinking this is the old Bills team from the last like 2 years, especially. And it is not that. This is not your Pappy's Bills team. So we're going to have to just wait and see how this goes. But tune back in tomorrow because we have the antithesis of the Bills tomorrow. We have a team that's all potential and everything's a discount because tomorrow we will be talking about the Carolina Panthers. So we'll catch you tomorrow. Until then, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!